I'm Bruce Fummey, and I'm standing on the Scottish-English border, and I mean literally on the border. I came down here to make a couple of videos about the border reivers of the 16th century, and I discovered a couple of really interesting quirks about the Scottish-English border that I bet most of you didn't know. But if you stick with me, you're going to find out today. If you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then click the subscribe button at the bottom right hand side of the screen. In the meantime, let me tell you a story. Now, the buildings there are the back of the hotel that I'm staying in for 3 nights as I film videos about the border reivers. I promised my wife a summer holiday and this is it. In fact, her summer holiday's holding that camera. Stop it! Now, the first thing that I'm going to tell you about is something that I hinted at in my video, How Did Scotland Get Its Borders? Now, I'll leave a link to that video at the end, but this is actually the bit of the border that I refer to here. That wooden bridge goes over a ditch and it's called Scots Dyke. But for hundreds of years, the lands around here were called the debatable lands. For the most part, the border between Scotland and England was decided by Alexander II of Scotland and Henry III of England at the Treaty of York in 1237. It goes along the River Tweed from the east to Carham, turns south for a bit, and then it heads west to where the Cairshopfoot Burn meets the Liddell Water, which continues to the River Esk over there and ultimately to the Solway Firth. Except it doesn't quite do that. Now, back in the day, somebody had to protect the border. On each side there were marcher wardens to make sure that there were no incursions by other side hanky-panky. On the Scottish side, the Scots, the Johnsons and the Maxwells kept an eye on things. On the English side, there was a march warden in Carlisle. The problem was that this chunk of land, this territory here between the River Esk and the River Wark, was a bit uncertain. These were called the debatable lands. In that area, you'd find the Armstrongs, the Grahams, the Elliots and the Bells. Now the problem was that these families were too powerful for the march wardens to easily deal with, but not a big enough problem to justify an army from London or Edinburgh. Truth be told, both London and Edinburgh were probably quite glad to have a buffer zone. But it meant that these families tended to act with impunity, nipping across whatever border they liked to nick stuff and never really been firmly dealt with. Now, James V tried to deal with the Armstrongs on this side of the border, and I've made a video about that. Right, I'll leave a link. Spoiler alert, it wasn't until after he was dead and his daughter Mary Queen of Scots was on the throne in 1552 that an agreement was finally reached, sealed by the French ambassador. Here, in the west, the border would run from the source of the River Wark across to the point of the River Esk opposite the house of Fergus Graham. I'd be tempted to get Fergus Graham to move to Hastings and bingo, you've got a new territory. It's effectively what Tony Blair did with the sea border in the other direction before giving Scotland devolution. That oil won't drill itself, you know. Burning carbon's bad, I was just making a point about the border. Now, that line between two rivers would be split so that the English got the eastern side with the main road north and the Scots got the western side with a lot of bog and moorland. Who doesn't like a bit of bog and moorland, let's be honest. Now, to ensure that there were no further disputes, they built a mound here called the Scots Dyke as a demarcation line, and that's the one that we're standing. I'm actually doing this Scotland history tour in England, but only just. But I've got an even more interesting quirk of the border that I want to show you, and it wasn't due to the diplomacy of kings, queens or ambassadors, but much more ordinary folk. Let's head east. We've just had 3 wonderful nights at the Marchbank Hotel, Longtown. The food was fantastic, and I'm not a big eater. Anyway, you must stay there if you can, but we've come east, and this is the River Tweed, the border between Scotland and England. The border is the centre point all the way along the river, but this field on the English side of the Tweed is Scottish. Now, I don't know how the farmer's going to get his tractor into this field in an independent Scotland, but it'll be the bridgehead for a military assault when we eventually take them over. Seeing as Fergus Graham didn't move to Hastings. Sadly, somebody's going to take that joke seriously and there'll be aggressive rants in the comment section. What can I say? Social media and modern politics are an inflammatory mix. So, why is this field part of Scotland? Let me show you in a Google map. I'm standing here. I'm hoping that you can see that the border at this point leaves the river and traces out the shape of a field next to me. The border goes a bit like this. I'm assuming I'll get the graphics done later. If you can see my face, I haven't. Now, you'll see on the English side of the border, on the other side of this field, there's a village called Wark. They've got a ruined castle that David I besieged, but that's another story. On the Scottish side of the river, there's a town called Coldstream. Now, way back in the day, they were both little villages, and once a year, they'd play a ball game. You know, that big Stramash type, early prototype form of football, rugby, whatever you'd call it. Today, this field is corn, but if we look further into the field and deeper into the past, we'd apparently see a rectangular area that had been enclosed close to the riverbank here. Apparently, there'd also have been a post that lined up with it on the Scottish side, because apparently this piece of land is the ball green where they played. Each year, the men of Coldstream played a ball game against the men of Wark. Incidentally, why not join my team by getting one of my groovy t-shirts, hoodies or mugs in the shop below this video, right? You get a translation of it as well, right? Okay, it's brilliant. Anyway, whoever won the ball game kept this piece of ground until the next year. One year, this field was part of England. The next year, it might be part of Scotland. And so the border altered each year based on the result of the ball game. Now, over time, Coldstream in Scotland grew bigger, whilst the English Wark remained a cute little village. And as the Scots began to win year after year, it was clear that football wasn't coming home at all. That's why this field on the south part of the Tweed remains forever Scotland. Isn't that a quirky and interesting part of the border? I've got a whole video on how Scotland got its borders, and you can find it here. In the meantime, Hammy and Doch is going to be Lama alive. Cheery and Rasta.